Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
Okay, welcome back. Let's go around the room. It's our tradition to go around the room and just say our names with each other. I'm Grisha.
Vin.
Jack.
Michael.
My name is Michael.
Michael.
Rick.
Patty.
John.
My name is Ray.
I'm David.
I'm Don. My name is Jerry.
Jay.
Larry.
Matthew.
I'm Oswaldo.
I'm Tom.
Paul.
Nelson.
My name is Kat.
Rob.
Mike.
Peter.
David. David.
Michael.
I'm Tal. Michael.
My name is Joe.
My name is Ruben.
My name is Roy.
My name is Mark.
Gary.
Welcome, everyone. We're going to hear today from David Lewis. He's been following the Dharma path for over 40 years and has a degree in comparative religious studies. He started out in the Tibetan Shambhala tradition and has been practicing Vipassana meditation since moving to San Francisco 30 years ago. For the past 10 years, he has been teaching and practicing intensively. David is a member of the Mission Dharma Sangha, where he teaches an introduction to insight meditation. He is a longtime member of the Gay Buddhist Fellowship and also leads a weekly sitting group for seniors every Friday morning. David is currently enrolled in Spirit Rock Meditation Center's Advanced Practitioners Program and has been on the teaching team for Spirit Rock retreats. So, thank you, David.
Thank you, Grisha. Good morning, everybody. I'm here to disturb your peace. Just talking after a lovely meditation is disturbing the peace, no matter what I say. But I'm going to talk about the election. So I invite you to take a moment and notice how you felt when I said that. I'm serious. Does anybody want to say like one word?
Dread.
Dread. Good.
Don't. Had.
Sorry?
Anxiety.
Anxiety, frustration, exhilaration,
Pleasure.
pressure,
Pleasure.
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 Are you going to ruin my talk?
I know.
So, Dave Risho was here last week, and some of you may have been here and heard his really excellent talk. And I'm kind of piggybacking on that. What Dave Risho Dave Risho is a psychologist, for those of you that don't know him or weren't here. He gave a really interesting talk about how to have compassion through understanding the kind of psychological reasons for why troubling or troublesome people are the way they are. But there's also a Buddhist response to that. And that's what I want to talk about today. Most of the adjectives that people tossed out were frustration or aversion or kind of trouble. Like people are troubled. I'm troubled. Women that have been abused are troubled. Muslims are troubled. It's a troubling time. It's a troubling election. I find almost every conversation I get in with everybody that they start out by saying, I don't want to talk about it anymore, I'm done with it, and then addictively go right into it. Right? That's familiar to you? It is. There is an addictive draw to it, and it's an addictive draw to something really aversive. So I'm finding it really interesting to practice with, as in my mindfulness practice. It took me a while to kind of get there because I was as drawn and addictive as anybody else. But what happened for me, the turning point, was the day of the second debate. I was, before the debate, I was kind of cleaning up in my kitchen and I was washing dishes. And I'd sat, I'd done meditation not too long beforehand. I was doing my dishes and my hands were in soapy water, and I have this big window, south-facing window over my kitchen sink, and I looked up and the clouds were all wispy and really pretty like they get sometimes in San Francisco, and I just dropped into this incredible moment of samadhi, of peace and tranquility. This is just so beautiful. Just standing here doing the dishes and looking at the clouds and nothing else. This is why I really love my practice. Because moments like this that just come out of nowhere, there's nothing intentional about them. But then it was time to go watch the debate. I turned on the TV, and by the time I went to bed that night, I was sick and couldn't sleep and agitated and upset. And the next morning I woke up, and the first thing I kind of noticed in my mental process is remembering that moment of samadhi and how wonderful it was, and then remembering how upset I was within an hour, how distressing it was. So how did I get from one place to the other? Simply by watching something on TV. That TV wasn't doing it to me, and the debate wasn't doing it to me. It was simply watching two people disagree and maybe not be nice to each other. But I was feeding into it. I was feeding in my own views and opinions. I was they shouldn't be saying that. He shouldn't be acting like that. We shouldn't have a candidate like this. It was really strong views and opinions that were serious disruptors to my peace of mind. So this is basically what the Buddha addressed. So what the Buddha was talking about. The Buddha said that I teach suffering and the end of suffering, and that's it. And suffering is how we create our own distress, and the end of suffering is how we let go of that. So this election is perfect territory for mindfulness practice, I think. And I invite you to do that. So I'd like to toss out today just 2 or 3 different kind of Buddhist ways of coping. Maybe bringing some more joy into our lives, but at least avoiding the aversion. Because even if you, as I have, or have already voted, you're going to be exposed to people's conversations and advertisements, and we have to put up with it for another couple of weeks. So the first suggestion I have from a mindfulness practice perspective is to do what I was doing that day before the debate, and without turning on the TV or any other screen. In Zen they call it carry wood, chop wood, and carry water. It's simply do activities that you can be 100% involved in that doesn't involve mental processing and judgment and views and opinions. Views and opinions are something that the Buddha said were advisable to let go of if you want peace of mind. So try not multitasking. Spending a little bit more time in nature. Taking a walk instead of looking at screens. Experience the thusness of the moment. So that's a little bit easier for those of you that have a meditation practice because we have some control over our minds. If you don't have a mindfulness practice, it's a little bit harder to get out of the head that way. But in a nutshell, the way to get out of your head is to get into your body. Do something with the body. Do some yoga. So that's one suggestion. Simply find some samadhi. in your life if you know how to do that. The next one is to practice the Brahma Viharas, the sublime states. And I know you've heard talks about them before. Metta is the first one. Karuna is compassion, is the second Brahma Vihara. Mudita is sympathetic joy, and equanimity is the fourth. They're known as the sublime abodes in Buddhism. And if there are disturbing things happening in your life, whether it's the election or anything else, a sublime abode is not a bad place to go. The Buddha, very famously, this is probably the most well-known line that the Buddha gets quoted on, said, "Hatred never ends through hatred. By love alone does it end. This is the ancient truth." Most of us have heard that. A lot of us probably don't know, but it comes from the Dhammapada. It's a collection of quotes of the Buddha. Most of us might not know the two verses that precede that in the Dhammapada. He abused me, attacked me, defeated me, robbed me. For those carrying on like this, hatred does not end. He abused me, attacked me, defeated me, robbed me. For those not carrying on like this, hatred ends. When they go low, we go high. And then the next line is, hatred never ends through hatred. By love alone does it end. This is the ancient truth. Martin Luther King said, returning violence for violence multiplies violence, adding deeper darkness to a night already devoid of stars. Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only love can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. So love, or loving kindness, is the usual translation for metta, for the Pali word metta, the first of the Brahma Viharas. But a gay Buddhist scholar, gay English Buddhist scholar that I greatly admire, named John Peacock, he's a translator, and he prefers to use unconditional friendliness as a definition for metta, which I also prefer. It's not always easy to love really difficult people, but we can have some friendliness towards them, some openness. That is usually taught, and this is the way you've probably heard it, taught as a series of phrases that we repeat. Sending loving kindness or unconditional friendliness to ourselves, to other people in our lives, to all creatures. Phrases like, may you be safe and protected. May you be healthy in body and mind. May you be free of suffering. But the Buddha didn't invent those phrases. Those were developed by monastics some 500 years after the Buddha lived. So when the Buddha talked about metta, about unconditional friendliness, it was much wider and more general sort of discussion than simply, it wasn't so much a practice as a practice of opening up the heart. He actually offered it as, you might know this, he offered it as a practice to combat fear, because the monks were, he was sending his monks out into the woods and saying, find a treatise underneath or small huts away from everybody else and meditate and come back in 30 days and report to me. And it was scary out there in the Thai forest. There were tigers, there were cobras, the monks believed in devas and spirits in the woods. They thought were bothering them. And oftentimes, in modern times, we define these spirits that haunt us when we're meditating as our sankharas, our own personal neuroses, our worries, our fears, our anxiety. That which comes to us when we get quiet. So metta practice was offered as an antidote to this. The Buddha taught that we should have an unconditional friendliness to our own experience, whatever comes up. And for those of you that have had some meditation instruction, you know that those of us who teach meditation often say there's nothing wrong that comes up. You don't have to get rid of thoughts. That's not what this practice is about. It's not about getting rid of thoughts. It's not about abolishing fear or anger. It's about noticing what fear or anger feel like. Noticing what they arise out of. And very often, if we can be friendly to our anger or our frustration, and notice what it feels like in our body, it simply dissolves by itself. So metas, I recommend thinking about metta as an unconditional friendliness towards our own experience, no matter what that experience is. It's simply allowing it without trying to block it, without trying to change anything. This takes some vulnerability, a willingness to be vulnerable, an openness, and a radical acceptance of who we are, just as we are. Radical acceptance of who we are. I have to quote Leonard Cohen because the New Yorker just did a great profile of him about a week ago, and he's been in my mind ever since. His songs have been in my mind. Ring the bells that still can ring, forget your perfect offering, there's a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. So when we let go of trying to control our experience, when we can just be friendly with our experience, fear dissipates. We don't get rid of fear by blocking it, forcing it to go away. We just recognize it. So meditation, mindfulness practice, is a friendly, interested, non-judgmental acceptance of whatever arises in our experience. And that's what practicing with metta for ourselves is. Friendly acceptance of our own experience. Walt Whitman said, be curious, not judgmental. So it starts at home. It starts within. If we want less judgment in the world, we have to start with ourselves, being less judgmental towards our own experience. And then maybe we can start being less judgmental about other people's. The purpose of loving kindness and compassion practices, both, is to cultivate the intention to embrace all parts of yourself and to overcome feelings of separation from yourself and others. We learn to receive and work with our most unskillful mental habits as sources of needless suffering and spontaneously move toward change in order to relieve the suffering. That's the process of achieving freedom, of awakening. And it's not always easy. Even metta is not always easy. Ajahn Sachito, who's a Western monastic teacher in the Theravada tradition, has a quote about this that I really appreciate about metta, about how metta is not always easy. He says, there are times when my kindness amounts to just not holding on to the negative impression I have of someone, including myself. There are times when my kindness amounts to just not holding on to the negative impression I have of someone, including myself. If you can just do that, this is a giant step in the right direction. So the second of the Brahma Viharas that might be useful to you in these troubling times is compassion. Runa is the Pali word. And there's no better translation for that I know of than compassion. Calm passion with suffering. Passion's Latin for suffering. So that's what Dave Risha was talking about last week, was how we can try to find some compassion for even the most troubling people by understanding what's behind their troubledness. It can be useful. You talked about the childhood development of someone with a narcissistic personality disorder. Here's what the great American Dharma master Henry Wadsworth Longfellow had to say about that. Every man has his secret sorrows, which the world knows not. And oftentimes we call a man cold when he is only sad. If we could read the secret history of our enemies, we should find in each man's life sorrow and suffering enough to disarm all hostility. Very beautiful. Another quote about compassion. This is from Ezra Bida. Whenever we find fault with others, whether through anger, contemptuous certainty, self-righteousness, or gossip, it is often based in fear. We may not be aware of our fears, but when we look deeply, we may discover the fear of rejection, loss of control, or unworthiness, or the fear of disconnection. But refraining alone is not enough. By itself, it is just behavior modification, and is neither healing nor transformative. Only through uncovering and consciously entering into the deep hole inside, welcoming the fear with curiosity and compassion, can we ultimately reconnect with the basic wholeness of our true nature. So again, it starts at home. We want to be more compassionate for other people. We have to start being more compassionate with ourselves. And holding our own fear or anger or whatever it is with some kindness and acceptance. Trusting that it may go away all by itself. A strategy I use sometimes when I'm working with difficult people, whether they're in the news or in my family, is I remind myself that they're motivated, guaranteed. They're motivated by exactly the same thing that motivates me. And that's the desire to be happy. Everybody does pretty much everything they do in order to be safe and happy. You might say survive, but I think happiness is a pretty strong motivation. A lot of people do very unskillful things in unskillful ways, sometimes harming other people. But very often the motivation is still they just want to be happy. I find that helpful. So equanimity is the fourth Brahma Vihara. Reinhold Niebuhr, the theologian, philosopher, was the origin of the Serenity Prayer. A lot of people know the Serenity Prayer, might not know that it belongs to Niebuhr. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Couldn't be more Buddhist. I mean, that's pretty much a definition of equanimity. The wisdom to know the difference. In the West, especially we Americans, we're really good at the changing part. When something is not to our liking in our lives or our world, so we've got to change it, do something. We're not so good at the letting go part. So that's where Buddhist practice, I really think, has a rich offering to us. It teaches us how to let go. Letting go is the third noble truth. The end of the cause of suffering. It's about letting go. It's something that can be practiced and something that can be learned. It doesn't always come easily. Let go. But it's a core practice in Buddhism. It's the cause of freedom and happiness. So, getting back to the election, think about ways that you might be able to let go. Maybe it just means avoiding screens or the news, or not looking at the computer first thing in the morning, or cutting back at the very least. A little renunciation wouldn't hurt. The Buddha had talked about clinging, which is the second noble truth, craving and clinging, as the cause of suffering, and letting go as being the solution. And he actually had a list, of course. Buddha always had a list. Helps us remember things. He had a list of categories of things to let go of if we want to be happy. And it bears paying attention to, this list, things to be let go of. First one is sense desires. It's our addictions. Repeated craving for worldly things, sense desires, to be let go of to the best of our knowledge, best of our ability. Second one, one of my favorites, is views and opinions. Buddha said, if you want to be happy, let go of views and opinions. Third was rites and rituals, which in the Buddha's time we think that the Buddha was talking about the Brahmanic practices of, if you wanted anything, if you wanted healthy crops or a safe childbirth, or you wanted to find the right spouse, you would go to a Brahmin and pay him money. Brahmin being a priest, Hindu priest, and pay him money, and have him do rituals. And that's how you made things happen to your benefit. Buddha said, don't do that. Nobody's in control but you. But in the modern day, what we generally talk about when we talk about rites and rituals is our need to have things be a certain way, the way things ought to be done, the way things should be done. And the fourth and last category of things to be let go of is the sense of self. Anatta, we've talked about before here in the Sangha. Not self, letting go of a sense of self. But this is about ego, and it's what Dave Richo was talking about last week. Is how ego gets in the way, how damaging it is. So a sense of self is, if we want to be happy, let go of it. I would just suggest, thinking back on what the person that Dave was talking about last week, look at someone with a really big ego and ask if they're happy. So equanimity calls for discernment and skillful means, the ability to make wise choices, the wisdom to know the difference from the Serenity Prayer. It's not about disengaging from the world. It's about stepping back before we take action. Action is karma. And action could be words, or even thoughts, and certainly deeds. Stepping back, taking a breath before we act, responding rather than reacting. It's the core Buddhist outcome for mindfulness practice, is learning how to respond rather than react, become less reactive in our life, more responsive. Again, the Buddha said that the practice is about suffering at the end of suffering. And most Buddhist practices are grounded in perceiving and avoiding reactivity and learning a skillful response. That's the practice. One definition of enlightenment, I think it might be a Zen definition, but correct me if I'm wrong, is having the proper response. Simple as that. So when you notice reactivity arising, when you're looking at the newspapers or in a conversation or confronted with the election, when you notice reactivity arising, you had reactivity when I said the election at the beginning, right? That was a reaction. Simply take a step back. Is there something I can let go of? I don't have to engage in this. I don't have to get involved. So the Brahma Viharas, which I'm finished with now, the Brahma Viharas were the second category of actions that I'm offering as something that might be helpful and might be healing in dealing with troubled times. The first one was simply samadhi, being in the moment, being in our body rather than our head. The second one is the Brahma Viharas. And the third is engaged Buddhism. I'm not going to say a whole lot about it, but a friend of mine posted this on Facebook. And it sums up for me how engaged Buddhism or engaged action for karma offers another solution, another very dharmic solution for dealing with a difficult world. While much of America seems to be getting more and more divisive, I'm going to be holding doors for strangers, letting people cut in front of me in traffic, greeting all I meet, exercising patience with others, and smiling at strangers. I'll do this as often as I have the opportunity. I will not stand idly by and let children live in a world where unconditional love is invisible and being rude is acceptable. Join me in showing love and respect for others. Find your way to swing the pendulum in the direction of love, because today, sadly, hate is gaining ground. Love must begin somewhere. Love will overcome hate. Love must begin somewhere, and love will overcome hate. Just repeating the Buddha. Hatred never ends through hatred. By love alone does it end. This is the ancient truth. So that's all I have to say. Those are my humble suggestions. And I'm, as always, curious to hear the wisdom of the Sangha and hear if any of that resonates with you, or if you have suggestions. So please, tell me.
David, thank you so much. That was really a whole source of knowledge and great reminders. I really like what you said about the Brahma Viharas. It's not about disengaging, it's about pulling back before responding, and then responding instead of reacting. Because I find that, especially with social media, you look at something, I look at something, and a lot of other people do this too, and react, post a reaction, comment.
Yeah.
Just based on a headline, without even reading the full article.
Yeah.
So we're like drawn in just by the headline.
Yeah.
And so maybe you could write a primer on Buddhism and social media, like engaging with social media from a Buddhist perspective.
I don't know. I'm deeply prejudiced in that. Even liking is a reaction.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. And I find what's really useful for me, Facebook is the only social media that I do, and I know there's lots of other platforms. But that's how I kind of keep track of some of my relatives and friends who live in other countries. But I get all the other stuff too, right? So how I work with it in practice is I try to be mindful of what's going on with my mind and my heart as I read different posts. And it's really complicated. I could go from joy to despair to frustration and it's addictive. But all that moving between all those different feelings and thoughts and views and opinions and judgments is kind of messes with my head. I don't like it much.
But I wonder if we could engage with social media, like you're talking about, engage with it, but observe what's going on with us, just like we do in meditation. It's not about banishing the thoughts, like you said. it's about observing, like, oh, this is happening, oh, how interesting.
Great practice. Yeah.
It would be really tough.
It would be really tough. It is really tough.
Yeah.
Try it. Try what Tom's suggesting. I will.
Thank you very
Appreciate
much. I guess what comes to mind is that I hear the answer that love is the only answer. That's the only healing way, and it's like, damn, because that is really hard sometimes. Politically, yes, for me, but on a daily basis for me, I experience it in my kindergarten classroom, and I have children. I wrote down like what you said about, like, remember that child is only trying to be safe and happy, but the unskillful ways that some children, people, and myself sometimes behave causes so much pain and suffering to everyone around them. It's so intense that, oh God, love is the answer for that. Like, I can't get any. I can't get it. I can't get it sometimes. But I guess it's just it's a really simple but very difficult practice.
Yeah.
Find the love. It's got to be there somewhere.
Well, that's why I like, for metta, that's why I like the translation of unconditional friendliness rather than love, because we can't always do love. Mm-hmm. But if we could just say, okay, I'm open to this problem kid. He or she is just trying to be happy. I can be friendly to that. And then you start dealing with the behaviors. And maybe we'll do it in a more tolerant way or a more kind way, because we know they're just trying to be happy, and we can have some friendliness towards them. So yeah, love is a tall order for certain situations. David?
I think my experience is most everybody's pretty fascinated with this whole election, as you're saying. And I don't think, for me, the answer is turning away from it. I find this is my responsibility to get involved. And but the thing about it is that the whole idea of taking refuge in the sangha, I find that I have to take refuge. I find that the vehicles that I let this thing into my life are important for me. And it's like getting a Dharma talk, and who is delivering that Dharma talk? And let me tell you, Rachel Maddow is a Dharma talk, turning on someone who's sympathetic to how I see these events is so healing to me. And so I would recommend, at least for me, filtering this stuff through a sympathetic companion who seems to come from my same experience is very, very helpful. And not just tuning it out and turning it out, because that's just seems like that's part of my responsibility is to deal with it.
Well, I'm really glad you brought that up, because I actually meant to say something about that. I agree with you. I'm not saying don't get involved, but I am saying pay attention to how you're involved. And if, like me and a lot of people that I know, your involvement is simply being infuriated by views and opinions, or agreeing or disagreeing with other people, that's not necessarily changing the world. So for me, being involved is what we do rather than what we think. So when I say, tune down the views and opinions, or when I suggest turning down views and opinions, that you might follow that up by saying, and do something that will really make a difference, be productive. I tend to notice in my own experience that I think I'm being useful by having views and opinions. And I think that's universal. I think we all do. But I question how much effect it really has on the world if we're not knocking on doors or getting money, or is that Does that fit at all for you?
Well, it's also creating boundaries. I think having boundaries around this kind of thing is super important for me. Is like on Facebook, for example, I start like skipping people's comments about the election. Okay, we're going to skip that one. And Huffington Post, okay, great source of news. Skip those certain ones and read the ones you like. I mean, it's quite entertaining. I think it's passing up a great opportunity to be entertained during the week. Is all this kind of news and it's a social. It's creating a huge amount of social awareness around certain issues like sexual assault. These are like huge learning opportunities for us. And it's not all bad. It's actually super enlightening and illuminating. And so, I don't know, for me. And so, I think this has been a really sort of fun experience, this whole election, assuming it turns out the way I hope it will.
The Buddhist question would be, is it a cause for happiness or a cause for unhappiness? Whatever you do, whatever news source you go to, or no news sources at all, is it a cause for happiness or a cause for unhappiness? It sounds like it's fun for you, so it's a cause for happiness. But it might be just the opposite for somebody else. Please.
A friend of mine in my building once, I like Frontline, and but it's always the most sad news you ever want to see. So I was talking to him about it once, and he said very seriously and simply, goes, "Then why do you watch it?" And I'll never forget that. And now after the second debate, I decided I wasn't going to watch it anymore. I couldn't imagine anything new happening. And that feels really, it's a great relief. And one time I was reading Facebook, and I deleted 32 out of 35 messages. So I'm thinking of giving up social media because there's just so much, well, for lack of a better word, junk on it, that I don't want to read. So there are different ways that I'm wanting to cope with all this. I mean, 15 years ago, we didn't have all this social media, so why am I spending 2 hours a day sometimes trying to sort through this shit?
Good question.
It's a waste of time. And so I'm seriously considering giving it up. Plus, I had trouble with my computer this week, and I probably spent 15 hours talking to service people. The problem still isn't solved. And
that's a cause for suffering.
I really don't need it. I have plenty of suffering that I can't avoid, and I can't avoid this. So I'm thinking of writing to people I like and telling them, don't email me because I'm going to give up social media. Please give me a call. I never liked social media when it started out because it was little messages that people could have phoned me and said, can you come over Saturday? I could say yes or no, and they could say fine. And they're afraid that they're going to get engaged in a long phone call, so they think that this is going to be faster. That's what I think. So I think it's impersonal and not very interesting.
So I would say it's neither good nor bad because we have someone that likes it and someone that doesn't like it. And it's just, it's for each one of us what's a cause for happiness, and a cause for happiness is different. And I would like to say one thing about what you said about Frontline, because it reminded me, the programs like that, or even the newspapers. I once heard a very wise teacher when someone was complaining about the pain in the world and the pain that comes across in media, pain and suffering in the world. The teacher said, look for the helpers. In every disaster, in every refugee crisis, in every hurricane, there's people that are helping. There's the rescue people volunteers, you know, any of those situations, look for the helpers. So that's an interesting way to
Yeah.
read the newspaper.
Yeah, there's some great op-eds. I like that.
Please.
I'm Mike.
Mike.
Comment on this whole thing. I was very touched by the quote by Buddha, which I haven't heard before, about you can't overcome hatred with hatred. So I'd like to get that, and we'll probably in terms of media, I made a resolution 2 years ago. I got my computer set up that I would not go on until after 4 o'clock. Well, I break it all the time, and because today I was headed over the Bay Bridge, and of course I got with the 511 to see what traffic's like. It actually improved by the time I left, so it would have been okay just to look at it once, but I had to look at it 3 times. I only looked at it once, but it would have enough. Anyway, I did minimize that computer thing. This morning I was taking a walk, I'm glad to say, and I looked up about 20 feet over above my head was a squirrel. And the bird in the telephone line, that song by, I think it's called Carol Kane or something, bird in the squirrel in the telephone line. And the squirrel looked like he was about to nibble, and I thought, go ahead, squirrel, nibble away. Chop all these people's cables off so we can go on and walk and enjoy nature and go to the beach. You know, so cut their cable. And cut all the cables. You know. So I guess it's just about taking my own judgments outside myself, and it's not right to do it, of course. But like it said, the happiness thing, that's the other thing I want to see again. The 4 criteria for happiness. Happiness, if I'm judging other people, I'm not really happy. Because then ultimately that comes back to judgment. Thank you for your talk.
Yeah, I find when I'm in kind of a climate of judgment, judging other people, it's usually there's something wrong with me at that moment. But thank you for that. Please.
Thank you for your talk, and thank you for letting me be here, not as a gay man. I'm visiting from Texas. So
Thank you for coming.
thank you. I'm very grateful for Trump because I was raised with an alcoholic, sociopathic dad that abused me every day of my life. And in my story that I can make up, because I don't really believe it, when he died, if the story is you go to heaven and you meet God and you talk about your life or something, I think God would have said to him, thank you, you did a great job. You were a great sociopath. He was a great sociopath, and I'm a great therapist because of it. And so I am grateful for Sarah Palin, because that's how we got our first black president. And I think that Trump is I'm very grateful. Keep screwing it up because it's perfect to guarantee that we have our first female. So I'm not afraid of him. I feel good. I'm glad you're here. So
Great perspective. Thank you for that.
And I just had one more comment
Sure.
about the kindergartners. I don't know when this started in my life, but I see signs around people's necks, and usually they say, I'm starving for love. And so everything, all those behaviors come out of woundedness, including Trump's. Childhood was pretty brutal. And so I see that sign, I'm starving for love. Sometimes I see, forgive me because I know not what I'm doing. You know, but longing for acceptance.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that. It's often said in our tradition that our best the most difficult people in our lives are our teachers, which is what you're saying. Al?
Well, thank you, David, again for another very skillful discussion. And when I do try to keep the Eightfold Path in mind, which to me is a little guidebook of skillful means. And to me, the word skillful versus unskillful is really a helpful way to navigate this existence. And I feel like since the discovery of how to control fire, man has always been dealing with the question of how to manage elements skillfully so that they don't blow up in our face, all the way up to gunpowder and nuclear power. And so again, social media is another tool that we have to understand how to use skillfully. I personally feel that the whole circus of the election has been a very useful mirror for the American people in which to see themselves and to get a feel for where we're all at in our diversity. To my point of view, it's a very overall positive view. And I feel like one other aspect of this is awakening a number of people who may have slept more comfortably before and now are realizing something that they may have to do or they may have to take a stand about, or just in order to be happy what they have to do.
Yeah.
So I like your skillful approach.
And I appreciate your wisdom. That is a perspective of wisdom, Hal. So you could do the next iteration of this talk. Please. Oh, we out of time?
Yeah, just about out of time.
One more? Please.
I'm Michael. I really appreciated the talk. I'm going to leave here and do a phone banking. I'm a decided voter, so I'm really glad I started here. But the comment about David's comment about Rachel Maddow, that's something I struggle with. I mean, to what extent, should I be seeking refuge among the like-minded? And to what extent do I need to be open to that contrary view in order to develop some compassion? I mean, is not, that we're going to our respective refuge part of the problem? That's why we're so different. And so that's sort of what I've been struggling with.
Well, that's certainly a powerful dynamic in our culture. Is people are going to their respective, and now with the internet and with politically dedicated networks, it's becoming increasingly easy to do that. Is hang out with only the people that think the way we do. But for me, that's yet another reason to back away from views and opinions and trust in my intuitive wisdom rather than listening to somebody else. I mean, it's good information. But one thing that I've always said about the talking heads on any network, it doesn't matter whether it's Fox or MSNBC, is if you turn off the sound and just watch, they're all doing exactly the same thing. So trust in your intuitive wisdom and your heart, and what your practice brings you. So thanks so much.
Could we hear from our host, Cass?
Yes, I'm Cass. I'm your host today. So please stay and enjoy the fellowship of the Sangha. There's some vegan nasty woman cookies. There's hot water for tea. If you have tea, please wash your cup out with hot soapy water. Or leave them in the sink, actually, because we have a dishwasher now. So, there's a sign-up sheet on the credenza for anybody who wants to be added to our mailing list. I'll be coming around with a Dharma bowl. Your generosity helps helps us meet our expenses and keep this place going. Around 12:30, some people gather at the front door and go out to lunch, and anybody's welcome to join them.
Thank you. There are also a couple of copies of Queer Dharma, Volume 1 and Volume 2. Feel free on the table out there. Help yourself. Any other announcements? Okay.
Next week?
Oh, yeah, next week. Thank you. Next week, October 30th, Kevin Griffin will be the teacher. He's the author of One Breath at a Time, Buddhism and the 12 Steps, and A Burning Desire, Dharma, God, and the Path of Recovery. A longtime Buddhist practitioner and 12-step participant, he is a leader in the mindful recovery movement and one of the founders of the Buddhist Recovery Network. So that's next Sunday.
And he's really fun.
What?
Really fun.
All right. Now the circle
by the power and truth of this practice, may all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all be free from sorrow and the causes of sorrow. May all never be separated from the sacred happiness which is without sorrow. And may all live in equanimity, without too much attachment or too much aversion, believing in the equality of all that lives.
Thank you for listening to the Gay Buddhist Forum. If you would like to hear several new talks per month and be notified of upcoming speakers so you can participate live, please subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and join our mailing list by visiting gaybuddhist.org.